Today's story starts a few years back. I was on my last internship. And you have to understand that on my internship that I had prior, which was in Dallas, Texas, I had gained like 15 or 20 pounds. So I didn't want to do the same thing when I went to Utah here. And to my surprise, I was pretty happy about it, but shouldn't have been. The office would bring in donuts every Friday. And I have a hard time saying no to free stuff.
Where's Dad tonight?
He's still at the all-you-can-eat buffet place in the mall.
How long has he been there?
Since 1979.
And free food, especially something sweet, is my weakness. So I started a lot of my Fridays by grabbing a donut because they were there. They were provided in the break room for free, and they were there for me. Why would I say no to that? And there were other opportunities where free food was provided, and there was typically a dessert, and I wasn't saying no very well. I knew better. I knew I should say no. I knew I should eat in moderation a little bit better, but I lacked the willpower. I don't even think it was a discipline issue. I'm very disciplined in other areas of my life. Why can't I say no here? Well, to make a difference, to improve my willpower in this situation, I decided I would go on a diet. I had a friend who encouraged me to do this. It was a paleo diet. They sent me a 30-day diet challenge. And in there, you say no to, you say no to a lot in the paleo diet. And I figured, though, if it was just for 30 days, I could do it. I ended up building some good habits that came out of that diet, but it didn't stop me from saying yes to free food forever. I did successfully say no to all desserts and anything that violated the paleo diet for those 30 days because I knew that my no was temporary. But the moment those 30 days were over and the promise that I made to myself had ended, I relapsed hard. There were these free little fruit tart things and donuts, and I made up for the fact that I was missing out for the last 30 days. If I lost any weight during that diet challenge, I gained it all back in that first week. In essence, shortly after succeeding for 30 days, I fell back and failed again. But I did learn from this failure. We'll get to what I learned in a little bit. But before we do, it reminded me also of a time that I struggled with an addiction to social media. This was as I was in school and trying to study for tests and do homework. I kept getting distracted with my phone. I had, in particular, just joined Facebook, and I kept opening the Facebook app in between doing tasks and would scroll, and 5 minutes turns into 10, turns to an hour, and you're just spending a whole bunch of time on social media. I remember spending so much time on the Facebook app. I would get bored scrolling through Facebook. So I'd close the app, try to find another app to go to, get bored looking for another app, and default going back to the Facebook app because that was my lizard brain reaction to being bored. And this was preventing me from being the student that I wanted to be. Eventually, I realized that in order to break the cycle here, I had to simply delete the app. This is also what I ended up doing with Angry Birds. That was a similar problem around the same time. I deleted both apps. I actually talked about the Angry Birds thing in a past podcast. And here's the thing. I could go to the App Store and re-download the Facebook app. No problem. I could also go to the browser, the little Safari browser on my phone, and log into Facebook there, even have it remember my login. But the browser interface on a phone for Facebook is miserable. I think they make it bad on purpose to make the app look all the more enticing. The app, from what I remember, was great, but I haven't had the app in a long time because I deleted it. And other than a few times when I felt it was necessary for finding something on Marketplace, have kept it off my phone. And my problem went away. I removed the addiction from my proximity, changing my situation. And, it wasn't that it was completely gone. I could always get it back again. But that bit of friction took a lot more intentional steps to get to Facebook on my phone. And it was enough to deter me from just acting out automatically when I got bored. And I became a better student because of it. And ultimately, this is how I broke my donut habit. And it wasn't something of my choice. You see, 2020 happened, and I started working from home. And there are no free donuts at home. There is no free breakfast at home. So, in essence, I didn't feel like I had a donut addiction where Friday would roll around and I'm like, I have to go buy my donut because I'm used to having a donut on Fridays. No, it was the free availability and proximity of it. As soon as it just wasn't there, the habit was immediately broken. And I no longer struggled with saying yes to the free food as soon as the free food was gone. So, what did I learn from this? I learned that I cannot willpower my way through breaking particular bad habits or finding success where I repeatedly would relapse or repeatedly fail. And if you feel like in your financial journey you are getting started, falling back, either on bad habits or life happens, and you go back to square one, you got to get motivated and you start again. I want to leave you with some hope. If we keep doing the same thing over and over again, just simply trying harder, do better, and we get the same result, that's insanity. What we need to do is learn from our failures, because from the failures come
The roses of success. Success!
And don't just take my word for it. Thomas Edison is attributed this quote: "I never once failed at making a light bulb. I just found out 99 ways not to make one." In essence, Thomas Edison had a mentality that he wasn't failing. See, when we fail over and over and we learn from our mistakes, we're not actually failing. We are learning how not to succeed. Depending on how you define failure, those who are wild successes like Thomas Edison got very good at failing or learning how not to succeed before they found their true success. Now, to drive these lessons home, I want to share with you an Improvement Pill YouTube video where he talks about failing over and over and how to break the cycle.
Oftentimes when we fail, we blame it on ourselves. We wonder why we're so pathetic, so weak, so incapable of getting things done, and over time, we start to think that maybe we're destined to fail for the rest of our lives.
And this here is the mentality that we need to avoid so that we stay out of a vicious cycle, thinking that we're not good enough, thinking that we simply need to pour enough willpower into something in order to make it succeed, and that we lack the talent to do that.
What you currently have is a belief that it's your fault for failing, and what's dangerous about this belief is that it often sends us into depressive downward spirals where we feel like something is wrong with us deep down inside. Like maybe we're broken, maybe we're destined to be a loser for the rest of our lives, all of which cause us to turn to our bad habits more as a way to cope, which causes us to fail even more.
I think this is a good point to pause and mention that in the first episode where I started walking through the HopeFilled Financial Footsteps, when I covered HopeFilled Financial Footstep number 1, I talked about how $1,000 may not be enough for a starter emergency fund for you, that you need enough money to stay off the mild, moderate emergencies that are likely to pop up in a year or two's time. Because if you run into a handful of them and they wipe out your starter emergency fund and you have to add more debt, and your goal is to get out of debt, well, it's just going to make you feel like you failed over and over and over and encourage you to fall into this vicious cycle of feeling like a failure when it's really not your fault. The problem, if that was the circumstance, is that you didn't have enough of a buffer to separate you from adding more debt to your life because stuff happens.
If you want to break out of this loop and start seeing progress in your life, then you must replace this current belief that you have with a more constructive one that will empower you and help you succeed even when you mess up. And that's what I want to do today.
There are two main takeaways from the video so far. One is we need to change our mindset to something that's a little bit more positive, optimistic, something that's hope-filled. And we need to make sure that we're approaching our next steps with a strategy that is designed to help us succeed in ways we have not tried before, in ways that helps us learn from our past mistakes and succeed the next time round.
You see, it's usually not a question of whether or not you are mentally strong enough. It's usually a question of whether or not your strategy is effective enough. It's a question of how you do things. You must apply the same sort of thinking to all of the areas in your life where you're currently struggling. Yes, willpower and motivation do play a role, but your strategy is equally, if not more important, when it comes to long-term success.
And I think the key there is long-term. I was able to find an approach where my willpower was increased, but only for a temporary amount of time, and it was increased because I realized in my soul that it was temporary. For something to stick long-term, we need to have a long-term approach. And I think this is why diets get a bad reputation.
If you're someone who can't seem to focus on studying when you're at home, then play around with different locations, the length of time of which you study, the time of day you study, who you study with, and even what you study, if that's even an option.
Ultimately, what I'm seeing from this part of the video is that we need to try different things. And sometimes we're going to try something that doesn't work. We learn from that and try something different.
Try out multiple things so you can figure out which strategies seem to produce the best results. Once that happens, stop looking around for something new and just stick to what seems to be working. An additional tip to help you think about strategies is to ask yourself the following question: how can I increase my chances of success without having to rely on more willpower?
That reminds me a lot of the Veritasium video that we covered at the start of the year, where Derek said that willpower is a finite resource, and those who are successful figure out how to reduce their need to exercise willpower. I think we need to learn from multiple individuals who have been successful before us and what it is that they recommend to find success, especially when it comes to personal finances.
And remember, it's not a question of why you're not mentally strong enough. It's a question of whether or not your strategy is good enough.
And I think that's where we're going to leave the video. I want to say that when I was writing the HopeFilled Financial Footsteps, I didn't want to just set up a strategy that took the wisdoms from others who, quite frankly, have been doing this longer than me. I wanted to also try to structure it in a way that helped optimize your motivation, that helped minimize the failures that would make you feel like there was a massive setback. I wanted to help develop a new system that helps you feel like you have genuinely taken control for the long run. And I think that's a good opportunity to segue into the main topic where we discuss HopeFilled Financial Footstep number 2, take control.